Hi everyone, welcome to our channel Let's Talk Operation Management. Today we're going to be talking about capacity planning, which is supplement 7 under in the book of J. Hazenberry Render, Supply Chain and Sustainability. The 12th edition, well, any edition but I'm using right now the 12th edition. So, what are we going to be talking on the capacity planning? The first thing that we're going to be doing is about the design and effective capacity. We talk also about the capacity and the strategy. We'll talk about capacity consideration, the different strategy to manage the demand and capacity management in the service sector. Then we will end this video with the break-even analysis, mainly for the single product case. So, when we talk about capacity, we need to know first of all that capacity as the main objective of capacity is about to process the different strategies of an organization so that we can build a production process that is mainly meeting the customer's requirement or the specification. Obviously, it always involves cost and the constraint that we have. Remember what we always say, that in operation management, whatever you do is always about in cost. It's always about minimizing cost and maximizing profit. So with capacity planning is also the same thing. It's mainly about planning our capacity, the different strategies that we're going to use so that we are minimizing cost and maximizing profit. But then what comes in your mind when you talk about capacity? I believe that most of the main thing that come in your mind is mainly the capacity of a venue, like a lecture venue. You also see maybe the capacity of a stadium, you can also see the capacity of a venue for a wedding, for example. You can even have an idea capacity of a venue for a conference, for example. These are generally one of the things that come in mind when one start thinking talking about capacity planning. But when you look about operation, when you look about capacity planning in operation management, we look at it in different many different aspects. Not only about the facility themselves. Let me give you an example. In operation management, for example, when we're talking about a restaurant and we talk about capacity, we look at many different things. The first thing that you might look at obviously is the capacity of a restaurant. Like, we have a restaurant, how many customers can we accommodate, for example? This is the capacity in the restaurant. Next thing is we might also look at our kitchen. How many staff do we need? And also, how big is our kitchen? Do we even have the right staff that can meet the requirement of the restaurant? Next thing is we can even look at our dishes, our product that we are providing. Do we have the capacity to provide, for example, this kind of catering, this kind of product or service, this kind of dishes, for example? Next thing, you can even look, well, it's still part of the same thing, the dishes that you guys are providing. Now, the idea is that with capacity planning, we don't just look at the physical part, but we even look at other aspects like the product that we are offering, the main power, which are in this case the chefs that are in our restaurant. Are we gonna be able to have that staff? Are we, based on the capacity that we are having, for example? Next thing is, if you look at the bank, this is just another example. Capacity planning at the bank can mainly be about, for example, the facility that we have in this case is about the ATMs, for example. How many ATMs do we have? How many people can they accommodate? You will find out that there are some banks, for example, that will just have one or two ATMs while there are people standing in queues. It's still part of capacity. Next thing, we might also even look at our labor that we have, which is mainly about the tellers and the people that are around, people that are working, for example, in the at the bank. How many people do we have? Can those people meet the requirement of the customers? Next thing is we can even look at the queues. In this part, we are mainly looking at the physical part of the bank, which is the facility itself. Is the facility big enough to accommodate, for example, a specific number of people in the queues, for example? Next thing, this is the last one. When you're looking at the manufacturing company, capacity planning in the manufacturing company can be looking, we can try to look maybe at our production line or assembly line. How many products can we produce in a specific amount of time? How many units can we produce in 2, 3, 4, 5 hours? It's about capacity. That's why they'll ask you, for example, what is the capacity of your production, or what is the capacity of your company or the production line, then you have to say that the production that our capacity is maybe 10,000 units in a day. It's mainly the capacity. Next thing is we can also look at the inventory. Big companies, for example, like Amazon, even like Takealot in South Africa, the main asset comes from the inventory itself. Remember in chapter 12, we talk about capacity planning. Inventory management. This is where now we are talking about, do we have an inventory that is big enough to accommodate, for example, or to keep this kind of product in our inventory, for example. Next thing is we can also look at the manpower that we have. Do we have enough people that are going to be working in the environment that we are having in, for example, the how do you call it, in the manufacturing industry itself? Do we have enough people that are going to be doing it? Let's say, for example, is the manpower, which is the top management. How many people do we have in the top management, the middle management, the lower level management? Or all these kinds of questions, those are the few things that one can ask when you are thinking about capacity planning. So you see that based on the organization, based on the industry, there are different capacity planning decisions that we can have, and these are just mainly about the restaurant, the bank, the manufacturing. At the university, for example, we can even talk about the capacity of our venues. We can also talk about the capacity of our staff. How many lectures do we have? How many people in the administration do we have, for example? Those kind of things. When you even look at the graduation, what are the biggest, how many students can we graduate, for example, per day, per year, and all these things. Those are different capacity decisions that one can look at. So next thing is, what is the importance of capacity planning? I'm going to give you a basic example. I don't know if I gave this once in class, but imagine you're working somewhere. Then, while this is your workplace, then you have a lunch which is probably from 12:30 until 1:30. Then you're like, okay, because it's lunch, let me try to get something at a certain restaurant. You get at the restaurant, next thing is you find a queue where there's so many people. And you're like, okay, I'm going to stand in the queue and just get my product as soon as possible. Or I don't know, my lunch as soon as possible. When you get there, you stand in the queue until 10 minutes past 1, where you have been in the queue already for almost like 45 minutes. And now you know that you are left only with 20 minutes before your lunch is over. And you have been waiting in the queue for something like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Next thing is you reach the counter, you place your order, and they tell you we are out of stock. So it means that you have spent almost 45 minutes in the queue out of the 1 hour that you have, and by the time you get there, then they tell you that we are out of stock. How are you going to feel? This is exactly the problem also with capacity planning. So like I told you, now in this case, capacity, we're not only talking about the physical aspect, which is the shop, but we are now also talking about the other part of the inventory. For example, you as an organization, you need to know that my capacity is supposed to be this big of the inventory, and because we know that during lunch these are the number of people that we are having, and then this is, for example, what we should avoid. This is what we need to keep in stock and all this thing. This is when our capacity planning plays really an important part in an organization. Next thing is that is what we call the time horizons. By now in operation management, we have noticed, for example, that every aspect that we talk, whether it's about location strategy, whether it's about inventory, we always have what we call the time horizons, whereby we are having, for example, we can say that even under capacity planning, we still have time horizons. There are decisions that you can take in a short term, short range planning, where others are in the intermediate range planning and others are in the long range planning. So generally, when you look at the short term planning, you will find that it's about scheduling jobs, scheduling personnel, and allocate machineries. Remember, I told you that capacity is also about the people, it's about the machine that you have. Those are the different decisions that you can take in the short range planning. But then in the medium range, we can also talk about subcontract, which leads us to MRP that we did last semester. Then you also have the equipment and the shift. You can even think about the personnel and all these things. Those are capacity planning that are mainly related to the intermediate range. Next is on in the long range planning. As far as capacity is concerned, we can even think about the facility. We can talk about the lead time of equipment and all those information. So you find out that different decisions in capacity planning will also depend on the size of the organization, on the different product that we would like to provide, and all these things. They are all related. Next thing is design and effective capacity. So whenever you cannot talk about capacity if you don't know anything about design and effective capacity. They all come together. So what is design? What is effective capacity? Design capacity is mainly the capacity that it is the maximum theoretical output of a system. Which means, what does it mean? It means that in theory, what is the capacity of your facility? This is what it has been designed based on the theory. Now, this is what we refer as capacity planning. But then there's also design capacity. Then there's also what is called effective capacity. Effective capacity is the capacity a firm expects to achieve given a current operating constraint. Most of the time, it is lower than the capacity, than the design capacity. How are we going to put it? Let me give you an example. When you buy a computer, which is, for example, 1 terabyte, the 1 terabyte is the design capacity, which means that when we have conceived that capacity or that phone, the capacity is supposed to be 1 terabyte. But then the effective capacity is the capacity that we know that it is required for the phone, or it is required for that specific item to operate properly. And in that case, you'll find out that even if you have a phone of 1 terabyte, they will tell you, for example, that the available capacity is probably 900 gigs. So what about the 100 that are left? Those are not really important. Those are not really enough for the for your, how do you call it, for your phone to be used effectively. So for it to be used effectively, we just need to use less than what is provided. That one was more about of a slightly complicated example. Let me take a basic one. You know, when you take the buses at UJ, but this is the buses, you will find somewhere it's written that the total passenger seat, the total number of passengers should be 60 passengers. Those are the ones that are seated. The passengers that are standing should be, for example, 15. Then they will tell you that the total number of passengers is 75. Now, when you look at the 75, this is what we refer as the design capacity, which means that the bus can take a maximum of 75 people. This is when the bus is totally loaded. So we have 60 people seated and 15 people that are actually standing. But then the effective capacity here, we will mainly look at 60. So what does it mean? You'll find that sometimes that in the bus, when you're already having 60 people, they'll tell you that the bus is full, while there are still 15 potential places. This is what we call now effective capacity. So it means that for the bus to operate normally, to avoid problems, we can just take 60 instead of 75 so that we can let people breathe. And it's quite easy, especially we avoid people standing. This is even what the design capacity is about. So every time, and you'll find out that the design capacity is always greater than the effective capacity. The design capacity, even if you are doing an exercise and you are given 2 capacities, note that the one that is generally the highest, the biggest, is the design capacity, because this is the capacity that has been initially, that has been theoretically allocated to a facility, to a bus and everything like that. Likewise, even when you go into a room, even go, for example, in a classroom, in a venue, we will say, for example, that the total number of seats is 350, but we can just take maybe 310, 320. Why? Because we want to let at least the remaining 30 place for it to be more effective for people to breathe, that there is space to facilitate the movement and everything like that. So when we talk about design capacity, we also talk about when we talk about effective and efficient, when we talk about the design capacity and the effective capacity, there's also what we talk about, the utilization and the efficiency. What is utilization? What is efficiency? So utilization is generally the percentage of the design capacity that we have achieved. So how do you calculate it? Generally, to calculate the utilization, you take the actual output of an organization or of a facility, we divide by the design capacity, and you will get your utilization. Efficiency on the other side is the percentage of the effective capacity that we have achieved. You calculate it by taking still the actual output, but you divide by the effective capacity. So you will find out that the design capacity helps us to find the utilization, while the effective capacity helps us to find the efficiency. You just take the actual output, you divide it either by the design capacity to find the utilization, or the actual output divided by the efficiency, by the effective capacity, just for you to find the efficiency. Now, let me give you an example. We have this organization here whereby they have an actual production of 148,000 rolls. This is the output. Then we have the effective capacity, which is 175,000. Then we have the design capacity, which is 1.2 rolls per hour. But they tell you that the bakery operates generally for 7 days a week with 3 to 8 hour shift. So you find you the first thing is to identify which one is the effective capacity, which one is the design capacity. Obviously, the effective capacity has already been provided, which is 175,000 rolls. Then the design capacity is said to be 1.2 per hour. We need first of all to find what is the total production. So because it is 1.2 per hours for 7 days of 3 to 8 shifts, so we'll just take the 1.2 times 7 times 3 times 8. So we will have now 201,600 rolls. This is the design capacity. This even confirms the theory that I told you, that the design capacity is always higher than the effective capacity. In this case, the design capacity, we are sitting at 201, while the effective capacity, we are sitting at 175. Now, because we now identify this, we can now do the utilization. Like we said, the utilization, we take the output, we divide by the design capacity, while the efficiency is like we take the output and we divide by the effective capacity. In this case, the output is 148,000. Those are the number of rolls that are being produced at the generally, and in this level here is what has been produced last week. So the utilization means that we take the 148 that we divide by the 201, which is going to give us 73%. This means that the company is utilizing its facility at 73%, which is quite good, but we can still try to improve it, maybe at 80, 90, and all these things, they all come together. Then the efficiency in this case, which is 148, divide by 175, we have an efficiency of 84%. It's good, but there's still a room of improvement. So it means that the organization is efficient. What does efficiency mean? Utilization, I told you, is about how well are we using, how often are we using our facility, which is the utilization. But now the efficiency is at how well are we now using our facility, which means that the organization is using it well at 84%. So there's still some wastes that are coming, but then those wastes can be minimized. But at this level here, we are using our facility efficiently at 84%. All of these are ratios, which mean they are in percentage. Whatever you are calculating your efficiency or your utilization, always make sure that your values are in percentage. That means the answer that you get after the ratio, you multiply it by 100. Now these are the different capacity strategies. So you will find out that capacity is generally related to all the 10 OM decisions. In our very first video, in your first year, you guys talk about, even in the first chapter of the book, we are talking about the operation management decision. There are 10 of them, and they are different. There's quality, there's the facility, there's the production, there's location strategy. All of those are the different 10 operation management decisions. And then you will find out that capacity planning generally affects all those decisions. I'm just going to give you an example of some of the decisions that are affected by capacity planning. One thing that you must also know is that capacity decisions are generally related in the organization, in the mission of an organization. What does it mean? If your mission is to be one of the greatest, for example, manufacturers of tires in South Africa, based on the quantity, which means that capacity should first include the number of people. we need to have a high number of people. Capacity should also include, which leads to the manpower. We also need to include the financial part. You cannot think about having so many people, but you need to pay them. Where are you going to pay them? You need to find the location. We need to find a place where you know that well, obviously in this case it's in South Africa, but you need to find distribution centers that are going to ease the shipment of product from one place to another. Now, an example here is, let's say we have this restaurant here that is producing, we are selling food. Capacity strategy here, well, the first thing that I will think about if I want to start my restaurant is the manpower. As capacity, I needed to have a restaurant that has a capacity to accommodate a specific number, for example, of employees. Next thing is the quality. My capacity, as I have this number of people, I need to have people that know whatever they are doing, so that we can provide a good quality of the product. Apart from that, I can also need to know my schedule. It is a restaurant. Let's say we are working 24/7. I need to have a proper schedule so that I know who is working where, so that the restaurant is still open 24/7. Next thing, I can still talk about the facility. Where is my location? What is the size of my restaurant? Where is it located, for example? Then I can even talk about the production process. We want to give this specific dishes, we want to give this specific dessert. What is going to be the process? What happens when a customer places an order? How do they get them? What happens if they place that order online? You see that capacity is not only related to just one aspect. It really affects so many things of the organization. It affects the quality, the schedule, the people, the process. There are even others like money that we didn't even involve here. All the 10 operation management decisions, name them, and you can relate them to capacity planning. Then there's what we call the capacity considerations. So when one person wants to make capacity planning decision, you need to consider first of all forecast. Why? Imagine, like I said, you're having a party, and then you have already rented the venue, you have booked it. After booking it, you need to know, for example, that this venue, because there must be a reason why I'm booking a venue of 200 people. It's because I'm forecasting already that these are exactly the number of employees that I might get. So forecasting is these are the number of people that I might get in the venue. So this shows already that forecasting and capacity planning, they're working and they should be considered. The other thing is, like, you need to be able to understand the technology and the capacity increase. So right now, the technology is really one of our allies in what is happening with managing businesses, in the way that technology is really important. Right now, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and you know that even if my restaurant, for example, cannot accommodate 40 people physically, but I can also accommodate those people online. This is the use now of other platforms like Uber Eats, like Mr. Delivery. Those are softwares that they are dealing with technology to allow a company to manage also their capacity. Next, you need to find the optimum operating level. This is about capacity. Like I said, whenever you have an organization, you need to know, for example, that in normal condition, this is the exact number of output that we can have. This is the exact output capacity that we can make. You cannot think about capacity if you don't even know what is the maximum that we can achieve when we are busy. And finally, you need to be built for change. What does it mean? It's like capacity should be something that is flexible. You don't just say that my restaurant is just going to have accommodate 40 people and that's it. You need to build a company that is ready for change. This is even what is related to flexibility. Initially, we have said that we can produce 40 dishes, but how far can we push? Can we even go more than that without actually affecting the production negatively? So this is the flexibility part, which is also related to the build for change, which is also related to one of the consideration of capacity planning. Under capacity, there's still what we call economies and diseconomies of scale. Economies of scale, you will notice that in this graph here, on the y-axis, we have the average unit cost, and then on the x-axis we have the number of rooms. What does it mean here? Economies of scale, the principle is that with the economies of scale, the idea is the more you buy, the less you pay. So which means that in other way, if you buy more, you will pay less. that is oh sorry, the idea is the less you buy, the more you pay. Between bracket, what does it mean? It means that if I buy, for example, let me look at the graph first. No, my apologies. So the economy of scale is more about the less I buy, the more I pay. Yes, this is what I mean. Yeah, the less I buy, the more I pay. What does it mean? When you take the example of places like China City, for example, those are the different markets whereby when you buy less, you pay more. But when you pay more, you buy less, mainly based on the unit cost. So if they will tell you, for example, that if I buy 10 units, we're gonna sell. If you buy 10 items, we're gonna sell them at 10 rand, for example. But if you buy 100 of them, instead of 10 rand, we're gonna give it to you maybe at 9.5 or maybe even 8 rand. So this is the economies of scale. The economies of scale is mainly the less I buy, the more I pay. This is mainly the economies of scale in the production when you look at operation management. But now with this economy of scale is different. This economy of scale is the less you pay, the less you buy, the less you pay. The more you buy, the more you pay. This is the idea. It doesn't really affect, it's not really affected by the number of product. It's just mainly on the utilization. Let me give you an example with electricity. Electricity, for example, when you use Telcom will tell you the more you consume electricity, the more you pay. The more you consume water, the more you pay. The more you consume fuel or you drive your car, the more you pay for fuel. They won't tell you because you have consumed so much electricity, you're gonna pay less. It doesn't work like that. That is the diseconomy of scale. So the more I use, the more I pay. Economy of scale is the more I use, the less I pay. The less I use, the more I pay. This is how it works. That's even why when you look at the graph, you will find out that on the economies of scale, the average unit cost is high when the number of room or the number of item is low. But the more we start buying, the lower our unit cost start decreasing. You look at the blue line. Then with the diseconomy of scale is the blue line start increasing when we buy more. So when I move on 50, my cost is also going to change. My cost is also going to be increasing the more I'm buying. So managing the demand. How does it work about managing the demand? Whenever you have an organization, the next thing about capacity that you need to know is about demand. Demand is mainly what our customer, what do they want? So you need to know how to manage the wants or the need of the customer, which is mainly related to the demand. You'll find that when, for example, the demand exceeds the capacity. Here we are referring to a company where there are many customers than the demand. Which means, for example, I have 50 items in my inventory, but I get 70 customers. What do I do? What many companies do is like they can try to raise the prices, for example, so that we decrease the demand. If an item was 10 rand and we only have 50 of them in stock while there are many customers, let's try to increase the price. Instead of 10 rand, let's sell it at 15 rand. With that, we're still gonna sell, but we're gonna decrease now the number of customers or the demand, but we're still making profit. The next thing is an organization can decide just one to manage the demand is let's just produce more by increasing the capacity, for example. The next thing is what happens if the capacity exceeds the demand. In this case, it is this company that got a lot of product in the inventory, but there's no demand from customers. What we can do is like we can stimulate the market. This kind of promotions where we have buy one get one for free, or Black Friday, whereby we know that we have a lot of product in our inventory, and then we adjust, but the demand is not high. So what we do is let's just say if you buy one, you get one for free. We stimulate the market so that they can buy more, and then we can get our stock out, and we are still not losing. Then finally, you can adjust to seasonal demand. You will find out that there are some products in winter they get sold more than those products in summer. So what we do is like we adjust to those products. You adjust to product, for example, you know that sweaters or hoodies are really product that people buy in winter. Then what we can do is let's just sell them more in winter. We can even decrease the price. or you can even increase the price because the demand is high. But when we get in summer, people don't buy warm clothes anymore. So what we can try to do in this case is we can just maximize the price. This is how actually you manage your demand. The next thing is these are the different tactics of matching capacity to demand. Like I said, capacity is what the company is offering. Demand is what the customers are looking for. There are 6 steps generally. The first thing is making staffing changes, which means, for example, that if the demand is high, let's hire more people, let's hire more staff, because the demand is high. We have a big staff so that they can manage they can allow them to how do you call this, to meet the requirement or the demand. Next thing is we can adjust the equipment. We know that the demand is high, but the capacity is low. Let's get some equipment that can allow us to sell or to produce more faster, and then we can meet the demand. If you are in a restaurant, let's get many stoves. Let's get, for example, many fridges. Let's get many equipment so that you're gonna be able to produce more and meet the demand. On the third one, we have improving the process to increase the throughput. Likewise, if the demand is high, what you can do is let's try to increase our process. Let's find a way to manufacture more, to use a process that is more faster, a process that is more efficient, so that we are not missing, we are meeting the demand as per the customer's requirement. The fourth one is redesigning the product to facilitate more product. This is mainly if, for example, you find out that customers are not really buying. What is happening? Maybe our products are not good, so the demand is not high. Let's redesign our product. Let's give them something that they will want that is much better. For example, this is what happened with phones. You will notice that in the past, you will spend maybe 5, 4, well, let's say 1, 2, 3 years with a phone. People didn't see the need of buying phones because I can have a phone that is already there, which means that it's good. The battery is still fine. There's no need for me to buy a new phone. But then companies realize that we need to find ways to sell phones, because people cannot just have a phone for 2, 3, 4 years. What do? Let's create these phones whereby you cannot remove your battery, which means that if your battery is damaged, the only option is to buy a new phone. Let's create this option, for example, whereby the storage is not really that huge, which means that you can, if your phone is just 50 gigs is not enough, we create now a new phone which has double the capacity. Or let's create a phone that is faster than the one they are having. So we are redesigning the product so that we can be able to maximize the sales, so that we can be able to maximize the throughput, which means in this case that how many products we are selling, or we are manufacturing in a specific amount of time. The number 5 is adding product flexibility to meet the change. Like I told you, flexibility is really how fast we adapt with change. The demand is high. How flexible can we be? What are the different procedures that we can make so that our company is now producing faster without making the customer wait for long? This is now what I told you with different organizations, like, for example, the technology like Uber Eats or like Mr. Delivery. The fact is, customers are asking and they don't want to wait. How can we allow them to place their order when they're at home, so that they can even catch, by the time they come here, they can just fetch it without even waiting in the queues? For example, we have been now flexible. Instead of you coming and wait for your product, we can either bring it to you, or if you don't want to move, or you can place your order and you come and fetch it by yourself without waiting. Well, another option is closing the facility. Unfortunately, no one wants that, but it's another option, which means that if you feel like I cannot meet the demand, customers are asking for too much and I don't have whatever they're asking, let me close the company. Or if the capacity is still the customers are not asking for any product, I just have a facility whereby I have a huge inventory that is just there and not producing, I'm the one who is losing. Let's close the facility. It's an option, but unfortunately no one wants that, but it's just one of the tactics. You will notice, for example, that with the coronavirus, this is what happened, for example, with facilities like with shops like Edgar's, for example. They are closing their facilities because they notice that the demand is not as high as they would like. Now we are spending more than what we are gaining. So let's just close the facility. It's just one of the examples. So here on this slide here, we are trying to look at demand capacity in the service sector. So the service sector, the difference with the service and the manufacturing sector is like in the service you will find out that we don't generally see the product in the service sector. The service is not tangible, but in the the service is not tangible, yes, but in the manufacturing industry, you will find that the product is mainly tangible, which means capacity is quite easy. We know, for example, that if my company I produce 10,000 units, I need to have a facility that is this huge enough. If, for example, I'm producing, for example, this specific number of units, I need to have, for example, a big warehouse so that I can be able to store all those units. But this is quite different in a place like a restaurant where our product is not tangible. How do we manage the capacity even in the bank? For demand management, for example, we come up with point like appointment, reservation, first come, first serve, like in restaurant. We want to avoid getting people staying in queues. So what we can do is like before you come, just make a reservation, call, so that we can already know that we are expecting this this number of customers. Next thing is the first come, first serve rules, whereby we cannot accommodate everyone. The first one that came, those are the one. The first one that come, those are the one that we're gonna accommodate first. Capacity management also comes in the way that you can, even in with the employees, you will find out that you can have the full-time employees, temporary, or even part-time. This is mainly when we are talking about capacity planning, and we need to talk about the staffing process. You find out that those companies that maybe they feel like the demand is huge, let's get employees that are part-time. They can help us in the time whereby the demand is huge. When we don't have a demand, let's just get employees that are just how do you call them? We have these employees that are not really permanent. They are just there when the demand is huge, we get them. If the demand is not huge, well, we don't use them. We can just let them go, for example. This is how demand and capacity management works in the service sector. Then this is the last part where we're talking about break even. What is break even? I'm pretty sure that at this level you have heard about break even, and in this part here we're gonna talk about break even. We're not really gonna touch a big part of it, but we're gonna try an essential part of it. So firstly, what is break-even? Break-even is a technique for evaluation process of equipment alternatives. It means that we have different alternatives. You are now evaluating which one is better. This is break-even analysis. But mainly the objective is mainly finding the point at which we don't make any loss, which means I've invested 3,000 and I've gained 3,000. This is capacity, and this is break-even analysis. So we need to estimate, for example, the fixed cost, the variable cost, and the revenue. In short, how does it work? I need to strike a balance between my expenses and my revenue. For example, how many units do I need to sell so that the profit that I get and the money that I invested, the capital, is still the same, so I didn't make any loss, I didn't make any profit. This is break-even analysis. But in this part, I believe that when you guys talk about break-even, in the past, you guys talk about break-even only on the financial side, whereby we are talking only about how many units should I produce so that I get my revenue, I get the capital that is equal to the revenue. But here we also talk about the revenue, we talk about break even based on the number of units. For example, we like how many units should I produce so that there's no loss or there's no profit in whatever I've invested. So you will find a break-even will involve different costs, such as the fixed cost. The fixed costs are, by now you must know that it is a cost that is fixed. It doesn't change based on the production. It's mainly like the depreciation, the taxes, the debt, the rent that one person one facility is paying. Like whether you produce or not, your rent won't change. Depreciation is more about how fast a product or an item loses its value. You'll find out, for example, that a phone that has been released today doesn't have the same value anymore 2 years from now. Why? Because it has lost the value. This is what we refer to depreciation. The taxes, you pay the tax whether you produce or not. It doesn't really matter. Those are the fixed costs. Variable costs, those are the costs that depend mainly on the number of units that you have produced. You will find out, for example, that the number of material. You will find out that a company that has produced more will need more material, and the less that we have produced, we need also less material. There's the utility like electricity, like water. Generally, when you produce more, you also you also need to pay more with electricity, with water. A basic example is when you're at home. If you spend in holidays, for example, people pay more, or even in winter, people pay more for facilities like for utilities like electricity, because you are using it more. But in summer, you find out that utilities like, for example, electricity is not as used as water, for example. That is the variable cost. So in the break-even analysis, you should be able to identify what is the fixed cost, what is the variable cost. So whenever we'll be doing exercises, I'll show you different ways of identifying which one is a fixed cost, which one is a variable cost. One thing that is really critical is you knowing these formulas, whereby we have the BEPX, which is the break-even point in unit, and we have the BEP. In this case, we're going to talk about dollars, but in our exercise, we'll talk about rand, which is the break-even point in dollars or in rand. Then P will stand for the price, while X will stand for the number of units. TR will mainly be referred to the total revenue, and then F will be referred to the fixed cost, while V will be referred to the variable cost. Then TC will mainly refer to the total cost. Then TC generally is equal to the fixed cost plus the variable cost and the number of units. TR, which is the total revenue, is generally calculated with the price times the number of units. Then the formula is TR, which is total revenue or total cost, is equal to PX, which is equal to F plus V plus X, where we say PX is the total revenue, and then F is the fixed cost and everything. So what is the meaning of TR is equal to TC? TR is the total revenue is equal to the total cost. This is even the principle behind break-even analysis. Break-even analysis is the money that we will gain, which is the revenue, should be equal to the total cost, which is the money that we have invested. We need to find that point over which they are all equal. This is the basis. This is why we have PX is equal to F plus V plus X. Now, you guys will be able, now from that formula, you'll be able to deduct, for example, X, which is the BEP in which is the break-even point in units. It's gonna be equal to F is equal to P minus V. This is the break-even point in unit. Then you also have the break-even point in cost, which has not been provided. But in the next exercises, you guys are going to be able to see the different formulas in the different platforms, like I told you. So I think this is it about this session about capacity planning. Right now, we just did the theoretical part. In the next video, we're going to talk about the calculation, which are just going to be based on the break-even analysis, and maybe you're gonna try to touch also a bit on capacity, the design capacity and effective design, but that won't be a lot since it's quite obvious compared to the break-even analysis and everything. So thank you so much for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you have not, so that you are able to get all the notification. Thank you so much for your time, and see you.